The diesel smell was still hanging over my yard when I counted the empty spaces a second time. 22. Every service truck my company needed that morning was gone. At 3:17 a.m., Briar Glen HOA had sent tow trucks through my gate, and their president, Victoria Langford, had personally watched them haul away my livelihood. Then I saw who had let them in, and my anger turned cold. It was a man I trusted. If 22 vehicles vanished from your property overnight, what would you do? Because the paper Victoria left behind made this mess far more complicated than theft. 6 weeks earlier, she had walked into my office carrying 2 coffees. 6 weeks earlier, Victoria Langford walked into my office carrying 2 coffees and a county fire inspection report. I was reviewing Monday dispatch sheets, trying to keep 22 service vehicles moving without burning over time, when she set 1 cup beside my keyboard. I am not here as the HOA president today, Ethan. I am here as your neighbor. That got my attention. Victoria, usually dressed like every conversation might end with a photograph for the community newsletter. That morning, her bright pink, purple, and white floral suit looked strangely formal against the grease-stained filing cabinets in my shop. She opened the report and tapped 1 paragraph. Briar Glen Estates had 1 practical vehicle exit during an emergency. A brush fire 2 months earlier had backed residents up for nearly 40 minutes. We have 186 homes depending on 1 road, she said. I need another way out. I studied the map instead of answering. My 3-acre commercial yard bordered the subdivision along its eastern edge. Victoria had drawn a proposed emergency lane straight through the staging area, where my crews loaded tools and inspected trucks before sunrise. That route kills my morning operation, I said. I pulled a county parcel map from my property folder and traced an alternative along the drainage ditch. Move it about 60 feet east. You still reach the county road, and my trucks keep their staging area. She looked at my route, then at the estimated construction cost. That adds almost $90,000. Then asked the board what safe access is worth. Her mouth tightened, but she did not argue. That was what made what happened later harder to understand. Victoria had a real problem, and I wanted to help solve it. 3 days later, I let the HOA drainage contractor cross the eastern edge of my yard while they cleared debris near the ditch. Caleb Dunn, who owned Dunn Recovery and had handled towing for my business for years, was helping move equipment. I gave Caleb the gate code because I trusted him to lock up afterward. No temporary access agreement. No new written license. Just a handshake and a text message saying the crew could cross for drainage work. My dispatcher, Maya Torres, watched me put my phone away. You want me to document that? It is 1 afternoon, Maya. She gave me the look she reserved for decisions she planned to remind me about later. 2 weeks passed. Then orange cones appeared along the same route. The next morning, an HOA security SUV was parked beside them. By Friday, somebody had installed a metal sign inside my property line, emergency access. Keep clear. I photographed the sign, checked the survey marker, and removed it. Victoria arrived before lunch. She did not demand that I put it back. She simply stared at the empty post and said, "Are you sure you want to be the man who blocks an evacuation route?" That evening, Maya brought me an old closing file from the cabinet. "Ethan," she said, placing a recorded agreement on my desk. "I think you need to read what the previous owner signed." Maya slid the agreement toward me and pointed to a paragraph near the bottom. It was a reciprocal access agreement recorded 6 years before I bought the property, back when Briar Glen's developer still owned the commercial parcels beside the subdivision. The language granted ingress, egress, and emergency access across part of what was now my eastern lane. I read it twice. How did I miss this? Maya folded her arms. Because the title company listed it as an existing easement document, and you were more interested in whether the garage roof leaked. She was right. I had treated old closing paperwork like background noise. Now Victoria was treating it like a weapon. I pulled the recorded exhibit from the file and laid it over my current survey. The boundary drawing was old and frustratingly broad, but it appeared to touch the same staging area Victoria wanted. I called her instead of pretending the document did not exist. She answered immediately. "So you found the agreement." That sentence bothered me more than if she had celebrated. She had known about it when she brought me coffee. "Why did you ask me to grant access if you believed you already had it?" I asked. "Because I wanted cooperation, Ethan." "Then you removed an emergency sign." "From my property." "From an access corridor?" she corrected. By that afternoon, Briar Glen residents were receiving an email about emergency preparedness. It never accused me by name, but it mentioned a neighboring commercial owner who was challenging established emergency access rights. My phone started ringing. One caller asked whether I really intended to trap families during a wildfire. Another was an employee whose mother lived inside Briar Glen. Suddenly, Victoria had leverage that did not fit inside a property file. I responded with one decision. Nobody from my company would obstruct legitimate emergency traffic, but HOA security and maintenance crews would not use my yard as a general roadway until the boundaries were verified. I sent that position in writing to Victoria, the HOA management company, and Caleb. The next morning, Victoria answered with photographs of 3 of my service trucks parked partly across the route shown on her exhibit. She demanded that I keep the corridor clear 24 hours a day. Moving those trucks permanently would cripple our staging pattern, so I hired a surveyor to stake the recorded access area precisely. Before he could finish, a certified letter arrived from Briar Glen's attorney. It warned that vehicles obstructing emergency access could be removed and costs charged to the responsible owner. I called Caleb. Nobody touches my trucks without calling me first. He hesitated just long enough for me to notice. Ethan, if I get a valid authorization, I have to evaluate what the paperwork says. You know this. Yard. I know towing. And that is exactly why I am telling you to settle the boundary. 48 hours later, the surveyor called from the county records office. I found something strange, he said. The exhibit Victoria is using is not the last recorded version. The surveyor emailed me a county recording number and told me to look at the amendment filed 3 years after the original agreement. I pulled it up and immediately saw why Victoria had never included it in her emails. The original exhibit showed a broad access area. The amendment replaced that drawing with an 18-foot corridor along the eastern edge of my parcel. I printed both versions and called Naomi Brooks, the commercial attorney who had handled the lease dispute for me the year before. She studied the documents, then asked for photographs showing where my trucks normally parked. Maya sent her our morning inventory shots. Naomi called back 20 minutes later. Do not celebrate yet. The amendment helps you, but emergency access language still matters. Get every vehicle completely outside those 18 feet until we know more. That was not the answer I wanted, but I moved them. By sunset, Maya and I had measured every parking position and shifted the entire fleet west. We photographed each truck beside the fresh survey stakes, recorded the time, and saved copies off-site. 21 vehicles were clearly outside the corridor. Truck 14 sat closest, its rear bumper several inches from the line. Then Victoria arrived. She stepped out of her white sport utility vehicle holding the older exhibit. You are manufacturing a technicality around a public safety issue. I handed her the amendment. For the first time, she stopped talking. Her eyes moved from the recording stamp to the survey stakes. Then she surprised me. Fine. Keep the 18 feet clear, and I will take this back to the board. It sounded like a retreat. I almost believed it. The following week was quiet. No security vehicle. No new cones. No emails to residents. I told Maya we might finally have room to negotiate the alternate route. She did not look convinced. Victoria did not spend 6 weeks building pressure just to walk away. The answer arrived after closing on Thursday. A notice had been taped to our gate stating that Briar Glen intended to conduct an emergency access compliance inspection overnight. I called Victoria. She said the HOA's council believed the agreement gave them authority to keep the corridor unobstructed. It is unobstructed, I said. I have time-stamped photographs. Then you have nothing to worry about. I forwarded the notice to Naomi and sent Victoria, the management company, and Caleb another written warning that nobody had permission to enter the fenced portions of my yard or remove vehicles outside the recorded corridor. At 8:46 that night, Caleb texted me 4 words. We need to talk. I called twice. No answer. At 11:12, one of my exterior cameras captured Victoria standing beside Caleb at my gate, studying a clipboard. Then Caleb reached toward the keypad I had trusted him with, and the gate began sliding open. I watched the gate roll open on my phone while I was standing in my kitchen 12 miles away. Calling the police was my first instinct, but Naomi stopped me. You have a recorded access dispute, and they have an attorney claiming contractual authority. Preserve everything. Do not give Victoria a confrontation she can use against you. I hated that advice because it meant watching. At 11:19, the first done recovery truck entered. Caleb never called me back. More trucks followed. Victoria stayed near the gate with an HOA security supervisor, checking vehicle numbers against a clipboard. I opened our live camera archive and started saving every angle to cloud storage. Maya joined remotely and built a vehicle log while I dictated timestamps. Truck 6 is outside the stakes, she said. So is 9. Ethan, they are not towing the corridor. They are clearing the yard. That changed everything. By 12:07, 8 vehicles were gone. I called Caleb again. This time he answered. Diesel engines rumbled behind him. You received my written warning. I did. Then why are my trucks moving? His voice tightened. Victoria gave us an authorization backed by the access agreement and a legal opinion. I verified the original recorded document. Not the amendment. Silence. Caleb, did she give you the amendment? He did not answer directly. I cannot litigate property boundaries from a tow truck. Then stop taking vehicles outside the boundary. He said he would review it and ended the call. For 6 minutes, nothing moved. I thought I had finally slowed them down. Then the towing resumed. At 1:14, Naomi received a copy of Victoria's authorization. It described my entire staging area as an obstruction affecting emergency access, even though the amended corridor was only 18 feet wide. Naomi immediately told me not to sign, threaten, block, or physically interfere with anyone. We needed the trucks back, but first we needed a clean record of exactly what Victoria had ordered. By 2:31, only 4 service vehicles remained. That was when Victoria called me herself. She sounded tired, not triumphant. This can stop tonight. Grant Briar Glen a permanent emergency access easement along the route we proposed, and I will authorize release of every vehicle. For one ugly second, I considered it. 11 employees would arrive before dawn expecting trucks. 2 major customers had emergency contracts with us. A permanent easement would damage my operation, but losing a full morning could damage my company immediately. Then Maya interrupted from the camera desk. Ethan, do not answer her yet. I found something on the towing authorization. She enlarged the payment section. Done recovery was not being paid by Briar Glen HOA. The customer listed on every tow was a separate company called Briar Glen Community Services, Limited Liability Company. Maya went quiet, then said, I recognize that name. They have been sending us money every month for years. Maya pulled up the deposit history while I kept Victoria waiting on the other line. Briar Glen Community Services had sent us $600 on the first business day of every month since I bought the property. I had always treated it as inherited rental income and let the bookkeeping software categorize it automatically. What are they renting? I asked. Maya searched our scanned closing records by the company name instead of the HOA name. 30 seconds later, she found a 4-page parking license transferred with my purchase. Briar Glen Community Services was paying to store the HOA's maintenance and security fleet on a narrow commercial parcel behind the clubhouse. My parcel. I sent the document to Naomi. Her response came fast. This matters, but do nothing until I read the termination language. Meanwhile, Caleb finally stopped his drivers. 22 vehicles had already been removed, but the amended survey and my time-stamped photographs had forced him to question Victoria's authorization. At 3:06, he called. I have suspended any additional action on your property until council sorts out the boundary. There are no additional vehicles to take, Caleb. You already took 22. He exhaled. I know. Then came the first break of the night. After reviewing the amendment, Caleb agreed not to assess additional release conditions beyond what his company was legally required to charge while the authorization was disputed, and he gave Naomi the locations of all 3 storage facilities. For about 5 minutes, I thought we had turned the corner. We knew where my trucks were. We had the narrower recorded corridor. We had photographs showing 21 vehicles completely outside it. Victoria's leverage suddenly looked a lot smaller. I called Maya and told her to prepare drivers. If Naomi could get releases moving, we might salvage part of the morning schedule. Then Naomi called back about the parking license. Ethan, this is bigger than I expected. The agreement gave Briar Glen Community Services permission to park its fleet on my rear parcel month to month, but it also prohibited the licensee from using any adjoining access right to materially interfere with my business operations. Victoria's towing order had handed us a strong breach argument. I looked at the clock. 3:14. So terminate the license. Possibly. But there is a problem. The agreement contained notice provisions, and Texas towing rules still mattered. I could not simply lock their vehicles inside, claim them, or have them hauled away because I was angry. Every step had to match the contract and applicable private property towing requirements. Then, Maya opened the latest overnight camera feed from the rear parcel. Rows of Briar Glen maintenance trucks and security vehicles sat under the lot lights. One engine started, then another, then 6 more. A security supervisor walked down the row carrying a phone. "Ethan," Maya said, "Victoria knows we found the license. She is moving the fleet right now." I did not tell Maya to block the gate. That was the old version of me, the one who would have reacted first and sorted out the paperwork later. "Record every vehicle that leaves," I said. "Time, plate, unit number, everything." Then I called Naomi. She had reached the clause that changed our strategy completely. The parking license did not require a 30-day cure period for every breach. A specific provision allowed immediate termination when the licensee intentionally used adjoining property rights to materially disrupt the owner's business after receiving written notice to stop. I had sent that warning before the towing operation began. Victoria had acknowledged it. Naomi was careful. That gives us a strong contractual basis to terminate. It does not let you seize their vehicles. After termination, anything remaining on your parcel still has to be handled under the applicable private property towing process. I signed the termination notice electronically at 3:31 and had it delivered to every address and contact method required by the agreement. Then I sent it directly to Victoria. Her reply arrived 4 minutes later. "Your termination is disputed. Do not interfere with emergency operations." She was not backing down. Maya watched the rear lot cameras. "They are leaving faster now." That was when Caleb called. I almost ignored him. "Ethan, I reviewed the amendment," he said. "I should have stopped when your warning came in." Victoria showed me counsel's authorization and the older exhibit, and I relied on them. "You knew my gate code." "I know." There was no excuse in his voice this time. "Tell me what fixes it." I looked at Naomi's email, then at the disappearing fleet on Maya's screen. The man I blamed for taking my trucks was also the only towing operator in this mess who already had photographs, timestamps, driver logs, and first-hand knowledge of Victoria's authorization. More importantly, he understood exactly what documentation his crews would require before touching vehicles on my parcel again. "Do not fix anything," I said. "Tell me what I can legally do." That question changed the night. Caleb walked Naomi through his compliance checklist while Maya matched the parking license to county parcel records. We documented the termination, photographed the required property conditions, and created an inventory of every Briar Glen vehicle still present. No shortcuts, no locked gates, no invented authority. At 4:07, Maya counted 11 vehicles remaining. Victoria had already moved the rest. I thought that killed any chance of answering what she had done to my fleet. Then Maya switched cameras. 3 of the vehicles that had left the rear lot turned onto the access lane beside my staging yard. More followed. Victoria was relocating them to support what she was still calling an emergency access operation. One by one, the vehicles she was trying to save crossed onto the very commercial property at the center of our dispute. Caleb stared at the live feed I sent him. "Ethan," he said, "if she keeps putting her fleet there after receiving that termination notice, she is changing the situation herself." At 4:19, Victoria's white sport utility vehicle appeared at the front of the convoy, and behind her came the last vehicles she had managed to move. Victoria stopped at the mouth of the access lane and stepped out before her security supervisor could park behind her. The lot lights caught her floral suit against the line of white maintenance trucks. She looked exhausted, but she was still thinking 3 moves ahead. "Those vehicles are supporting an emergency access inspection," she said. "Your termination notice does not erase our recorded access rights." Naomi was listening through my phone. I did not argue about the easement again. That question had already been narrowed by the amendment. Instead, Maya and I documented where every Briar Glen vehicle had stopped. Caleb compared the positions with the survey stakes and his towing requirements. Victoria noticed what we were doing and immediately ordered her drivers back into their vehicles. Smart move. She understood that standing still helped us more than it helped her. Engine started. Headlights swept across the asphalt. I could have closed the gate. I did not. "Keep it open," I told Maya. Victoria looked almost surprised. Then Naomi gave me the reason our preparation mattered. The HOA still had passage rights inside the 18-foot corridor. We were not going to pretend otherwise. But the termination of the separate parking license meant Victoria could no longer treat the rest of my commercial property as storage for Briar Glen's fleet, and the camera showed several vehicles leaving the corridor and parking across my staging area after she received the termination notice. Caleb photographed each position before anyone moved it. Victoria walked toward me. "You are turning an evacuation issue into retaliation." "No," I said. "I offered you an alternate evacuation route 6 weeks ago. You turned it into control over my yard." For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she lowered her voice. "If I accept your route now, I have to explain to 186 homeowners why I spent weeks telling them yours was unacceptable." There it was. Not greed. Not some secret criminal scheme. She had committed herself publicly, and now retreat carried a cost. I understood it, but I could not let my employees pay that cost for her. Maya approached with her tablet. She had matched every vehicle on the property to the monthly parking inventory. Caleb had condition photographs. Naomi had the termination record, my earlier written warning, the amended access exhibit, and Victoria's towing authorization. Every piece connected to the same dispute. Then Victoria made one last move. She held up her phone and said she was authorizing immediate release of my 22 trucks if I suspended the parking termination until the board could meet. 6 weeks earlier, I might have taken the handshake hidden inside that offer. This time I shook my head. "Put the release in writing. All 22 vehicles, no surrender of my property rights, and no extra conditions tied to your easement." Her expression hardened. Behind her, Caleb's tow trucks began arriving at the edge of the property, amber lights turning slowly in the darkness. Victoria looked from them to me, then checked the time. It was 4:47 in the morning. "You really think you can remove our fleet before sunrise?" she asked. Caleb opened his door, stepped onto the pavement, and looked at the documentation in his hand. "That depends," he said, "on what you do next." Caleb did not move until Naomi finished reviewing the final documentation. That mattered. Victoria had already used urgency once to turn a disputed access right into 22 missing trucks, and I was not going to answer her by making the same mistake faster. At 4:53, Naomi confirmed what we could act on. The parking license had been terminated under the breach provision. The HOA vehicles outside the 18-foot access corridor had remained on my commercial property after notice, and Caleb had documented their locations before Victoria ordered anyone to move. Victoria heard enough through my speakerphone to understand the problem. "Then we will leave," she said. She turned toward her drivers. "Move every unit into the corridor and take them back to Briar Glen." It was the strongest move she had left. I stepped aside. "The gate stays open." She stared at me, clearly expecting resistance. Instead, Maya kept recording while the first security vehicle pulled forward. 2 maintenance pickups followed. Then the convoy jammed itself. The 18-foot corridor had been designed for passage, not fleet staging. Victoria could move vehicles through it, but she could not legally transform the rest of my yard into a waiting area while doing so. Her drivers had to leave one at a time. Caleb began processing the vehicles that remained parked outside the corridor under the documentation Naomi had approved. Amber lights came alive. Chains clicked against steel. Victoria immediately called Caleb over. "Your company took his trucks for us 3 hours ago. Now you are taking ours for him. Does that sound impartial?" Caleb looked at her authorization on his clipboard. "No. It sounds like I relied on an incomplete exhibit the first time. I am not doing that twice." That landed harder than anything I could have said. At 5:11, Victoria changed tactics. She emailed written authorization releasing all 22 Mercer vehicles from the 3 storage locations. For 1 second, I thought she had finally folded. Then Naomi read the last paragraph aloud. "Release was conditioned on my agreement not to interfere with Briar Glen's continued emergency access operations." Same pressure, better wording. I rejected it. Remove the condition. Victoria looked at the tow trucks lining up behind Caleb. "You would leave your own employees without vehicles over 1 sentence." Maya glanced at me. Earlier that night, that question might have broken me. Now I knew exactly what accepting vague language had already cost. "My employees need their trucks," I said. "They also need me not to give away the yard they work from." At 5:29, another Briar Glen unit rolled off my property. Caleb's crew secured the next unauthorized vehicle. Victoria checked the brightening eastern sky, then her phone, then the remaining fleet. She could keep contesting the termination, but she could no longer undo the timestamps, the amendment, her authorization, or the positions her own drivers had created after receiving notice. Finally, she deleted the condition from the release document. Her thumb hovered above the send button while Caleb's driver began preparing the next HOA vehicle. Sunrise was closing in, and whichever button Victoria pressed next would decide which fleet was still sitting where when daylight arrived. Victoria pressed send at 5:31. Naomi opened the new release authorization and read every line before giving me the answer I needed. All 22 Mercer vehicles were released without any easement, waiver, or property right condition attached. Maya immediately sent our drivers to the 3 storage locations with the release numbers Caleb provided. I did not stop the towing operation on my property. Victoria had already received the termination notice. Her drivers had been documented outside the 18-foot corridor, and Caleb was working from the same compliance process I had insisted on before the first HOA vehicle moved. One by one, the remaining Briar Glen units left on flatbeds. Victoria stayed beside her white sport utility vehicle, making calls, checking documents, trying every legitimate option she still had. But she could not turn an 18-foot passage right into control of my staging yard, and she could not restore a parking license she had breached simply because the consequences had become expensive. At 5:48, Maya counted the final HOA-controlled unit still on my property. It was a maintenance pickup that had been moved from the rear parcel after our termination notice and parked outside the corridor during Victoria's relocation attempt. Caleb checked its condition photographs, matched the unit number to the inventory, and authorized his driver to proceed. Victoria walked over to me as the truck was secured. Her voice was quieter now. I was trying to make sure those families had another way out. I know, I said. That is why I offered you the eastern route. You could have built it with me instead of trying to control my yard. She looked toward the subdivision, then nodded once. There was nothing left to negotiate that morning. At 6:02, the last Briar Glen fleet vehicle rolled through my gate behind a tow truck. The eastern sky was turning gold. Every HOA fleet vehicle that had remained subject to the terminated parking arrangement and the documented private property process had now been removed. By sunrise, their fleet was gone from my property. Then the balance shifted back. At 6:37, the first Mercer service truck returned. Truck 14 came next, and Maya sent it straight toward the municipal water job with the hydraulic test equipment still secured inside. The other trucks followed from the 3 storage facilities until the 22 empty spaces from the middle of the night filled again. Briar Glen ultimately covered the towing and storage costs tied to its disputed removal operation under the resolution negotiated through council, and Victoria stepped down as HOA president after the board reviewed the authorization, the amended access exhibit, and the financial exposure she had created. Caleb and I did not repair our trust with a handshake. For months, every job between us was documented in writing. The evacuation problem was resolved too. Briar Glen eventually approved the alternate route I had proposed, with a properly negotiated recorded easement and clear boundaries. That afternoon, I changed the gate code Caleb had once known and handed Maya written access procedures for the yard. 22 trucks sat behind me, exactly where they belonged. My property was mine again, and this time the paperwork said it just as clearly as I did.